My younger son called, "Mom, are you having fun?" I was alone at home, and I hesitated for a moment before responding. My older son, Robert, his wife, Grace, and my husband, Matthew, were all at my younger son, Oliver's vacation home. Oliver didn't know that I wasn't there with them, that I'd been left behind, and more than that, he didn't know how things had really been for me lately. "I'm just the housekeeper, left here on my own," I finally said, my voice more strained than I intended. My son's confusion was evident. "What? Mom, what are you talking about?" "My name is Harper, and I will turn 72 this fall. After retiring from my job as a local government employee at 60, I had expected my life to be one of peace and simple pleasures, gardening, reading, and spending time with my grandchildren. Matthew, my husband, had retired a little earlier than I had. We have 2 sons, Robert, our eldest, and Oliver, our youngest. Robert and his wife moved in with us after I retired. I remember the day Robert suggested it. Our house had just been renovated, and it felt like he swooped in at the perfect moment, bringing his own agenda along. At first, I believed it was a practical idea. Matthew and I were getting older, and having family close might be helpful. But soon, I began to suspect that Robert had seen an opportunity to make his life easier, rather than considering what was best for us. Matthew never objected. He had always been soft on Robert, and that didn't change as our son moved back in, taking over the best room in the house for himself and Grace, at Matthew's insistence. I kept quiet, though my heart tightened. Grace said she wanted to be a full-time housewife, giving up her job to focus on the family. At first, I thought it might be nice. Maybe we'd bond, cook together, share stories. Instead, I found myself alone in the kitchen every day, cleaning, cooking, and doing all the chores, while Grace either lazed around or went out with her friends. And Robert? He only ever criticized, never lifting a finger. The days felt long. Grace would lounge in the living room, her feet propped up as she scrolled through her phone or watched television. I would hear her laughter echoing through the house as she chatted on the phone, carefree, while I scrubbed the floors and prepared meals. Sometimes I'd try to initiate conversation, to find some common ground, but it felt like I was speaking into a void. She would nod absent-mindedly, her eyes glued to her phone, her responses clipped and uninterested. Robert, meanwhile, had become a shadow of the son I remembered. He had always been ambitious, always wanting more for himself, but I never thought that ambition would turn into such callousness. Whenever he walked into the kitchen, it was only to complain. The soup was too salty. The laundry hadn't been folded the way he liked. It felt like nothing I did was ever enough for him, and each word of criticism cut deeper, leaving wounds that didn't heal. One day, I tried to talk to Grace, politely asking if she could help around the house. She immediately turned on the theatrics, running to Robert with crocodile tears, spinning a tale about how I had scolded her. Robert, in turn, confronted me, accusing me of harassing his wife. I felt my heart sink. The son I'd raised to be kind and considerate had turned into a stranger who spat cruel words at his mother. Even Matthew, who could have defended me, chose to remain silent. I remember that confrontation vividly. It was a rainy evening, and Robert's voice echoed through the house, filled with anger and disdain. "Do you enjoy making Grace uncomfortable? She's given up so much to be here, and you treat her like this?" His words struck me like blows, and I stood there, frozen, the dish towel clutched in my hands. I looked at Matthew, hoping, praying, that he would step in, that he would tell Robert he was out of line. But Matthew just sat there, staring at the floor, his silence louder than any words he could have spoken. The breaking point came when they planned a trip to Oliver's vacation home without me. It wasn't just the fact that they were going. It was the way they excluded me, as if I was nothing more than an afterthought. Grace had approached me one afternoon, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Harper, you're too busy with things here," she said, her eyes glinting with something cruel. "It's probably best if you stay. You know, to keep everything in order." The words cut deeper than I expected. I realized I had been left behind. Again. And I had no strength left to fight it. As I waved them off, my only solace was that the house would be empty for a while, giving me some peace. I watched from the window as they loaded the car, Grace laughing as Robert helped her with her bags. Matthew was there too, his face blank, his eyes avoiding mine. I felt a hollowness in my chest, a sense of being utterly alone. But when Oliver called, asking if I was having fun, something inside me broke. The dam that had held back my anger, my sadness, and my loneliness crumbled. I told him everything. How I had been left behind. How I had become nothing more than a housekeeper in my own home. There was silence on the other end of the line, then a sharp intake of breath. "What? They left you behind? Mom, I'm coming over." He hung up before I could protest. True to his word, Oliver arrived 2 hours later, his face dark with worry. His wife, Sophia, was with him, her eyes filled with concern. As they walked in, I felt a mix of shame and relief. I poured out everything I had held inside. The way Grace treated me, Robert's cruel words, Matthew's indifference. Oliver listened, his fists clenching and unclenching. Sophia, tears streaming down her face, hugged me tightly. "We're getting you out of here," Oliver said, his voice cold with fury I had never heard before. That night, I packed my bags. I took only what mattered, and realized how little that was. By morning, I was ready to leave the house I'd lived in for decades. I left behind the memories, the sorrow, and the burden of being someone's servant. As I walked out the door, I looked back one last time. The house that had once been my sanctuary now felt like a prison, and I felt a strange sense of freedom as I stepped away from it. When Robert called later that day, furious that they'd been kicked out of the vacation home, Oliver put him on speaker. "I sold the place," Oliver said casually, cutting off his brother's angry demands. "You can't use it anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. "What?" Robert sputtered, but Oliver wasn't done. "And by the way, Mom isn't coming back. She's staying with us now. If you need a housekeeper, maybe hire one this time." Oliver's voice was icy, each word hitting like a slap. Grace started screaming in the background, but Oliver hung up. I felt my heart pounding, but not from fear, from hope. For the first time in years, I felt like I had someone on my side. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I settled into Oliver and Sophia's home, a cozy, warm place filled with laughter and love. It was such a stark contrast to what I had become used to. Sophia was gentle and kind, always asking how I was feeling, always making sure I was comfortable. It felt strange at first, to be cared for, to be seen. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that. Later, when Robert and Grace tried to come to Oliver's house to confront us, Sophia was the one who met them at the door. She stood firm, refusing to let them in. "You're not welcome here," she said, her voice steady. "If you try anything, we'll call the police." Robert, looking utterly defeated, turned and walked away, Grace trailing behind, still shouting. That was the last time I saw them. I heard later that they were living with Grace's sister now, struggling under the weight of debts they'd brought on themselves. Grace, it seemed, had ended up in a similar position as me, treated like a servant by her own family. It was ironic and a little sad, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy. Now, I live with Oliver and Sophia in a beautiful, comfortable home they built with us in mind. Matthew, humbled and regretful, joined us too, and we've started to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy at first. There were many nights when Matthew and I would sit in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. I wanted to ask him why he hadn't defended me, why he had let things get so bad. But I was afraid of the answer. One evening as we sat on the porch, the sun setting in the distance, Matthew finally spoke. "I'm sorry, Harper," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I should have done more. I should have stood up for you. I looked at him, tears welling in my eyes. "Why didn't you?" I asked, my voice cracking. Matthew sighed, his shoulders sagging. I thought I was doing the right thing, keeping the peace, not making waves. But I see now that I was wrong. I let you down. There was a long pause, and then he reached for my hand. "I want to make it right, Harper. I want us to be a family again." I squeezed his hand, a tear rolling down my cheek. "We can try," I whispered. And in that moment, I felt a small spark of hope, that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. Every night, we share a meal together, something simple and warm that Sophia makes with love. I finally feel like I have a family again, one that sees me, respects me, and loves me for who I am. Oliver often joins me in the kitchen, helping with the dishes or just chatting as I cook. He tells me about his day, about his work, and it fills me with pride to see the man he's become. And for the first time in years, I feel free. The weight that had pressed down on me for so long has lifted, replaced by a lightness I had forgotten existed. I spend my days tending to the garden, planting flowers that bloom in vibrant colors. I read books on the porch, the sun warming my face. Sometimes I take walks with Sophia, the two of us chatting about everything and nothing. It's a simple life, but it's mine, and it's filled with love. Matthew has changed, too. He's more present, more attentive. He helps around the house, something he never used to do. He's trying, and I can see the effort he's making to make things right. It's not perfect. There are still moments of tension, still things we need to work through, but it's a start. And that's enough for me. One afternoon, as we sat together in the living room, Matthew turned to me, a hesitant smile on his face. "Do you remember the first time we came to this town?" he asked. I nodded, a smile tugging at my lips. "Of course I do. We were so young, so full of dreams." Matthew chuckled, a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. "I'd like to think we can still have some of those dreams, Harper. Maybe different ones, but dreams nonetheless." I looked at him, my heart swelling. "I'd like that too," I said softly. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself slowly healing. The wounds that Robert and Grace had inflicted began to fade, replaced by new memories, happy ones. I watched as Oliver and Sophia built a life together, their love for each other evident in every glance, every touch. They welcomed me into their home, into their lives, without hesitation, and I will forever be grateful for that. One day, as I sat in the garden, Oliver came out to join me. He sat down beside me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said, his voice gentle. "I want to make sure you're happy here. Is there anything you need? Anything at all?" I looked at him, my heart full. "I have everything I need, Oliver. I have you, Sophia, and even your father. I'm happier than I've been in a long time." He smiled, his eyes softening. "Good. Because you deserve this, Mom. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Tears filled my eyes, and I reached out, pulling him into a hug. "Thank you, Oliver, for everything." He hugged me back, his arms strong and reassuring. "Always, Mom. Always." And as I sat there, holding my son, I realized that I was finally where I belonged. I was surrounded by love, by people who truly cared for me. I was no longer just a housekeeper, no longer invisible. I was Harper, a mother, a wife, a woman who had found her way back to herself. And I was free. The days continued, each one filled with laughter and warmth. I spent my mornings in the garden, my afternoons reading or cooking, and my evenings with my family. It was a routine that brought me joy, that filled my heart with contentment. I had spent so many years feeling like I was nothing, like I didn't matter. But now, I knew better. I mattered. My life mattered. Matthew and I took walks together in the evenings, something we hadn't done in years. We would stroll through the neighborhood, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. It felt like we were rediscovering each other, finding the love that had been buried under years of neglect and silence, and with each passing day, I felt that love growing stronger. One night, as we sat on the porch, Matthew turned to me, his eyes filled with emotion. "Harper, I know I can't change the past, but I promise you, I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I reached out, taking his hand in mine. "We can't change the past, Matthew, but we can make the most of the time we have now. And that's enough for me." He smiled, a tear escaping down his cheek. "I love you, Harper." "I love you too," I whispered, and in that moment I knew that we were going to be okay. The journey had been long, and it had been painful, but it had led me here, to a place of peace, of love, of hope. And for that, I was grateful. I had lost so much, but I had gained even more. I had found my way back to myself, and I had found my family again, and as I looked around at the people I loved, I knew that I was finally home. For the first time in a long time, I looked forward to the future. I didn't know what it would bring, but I knew that whatever it was, I could face it. I had my family by my side, and I had my strength. And that was all I needed. I was no longer just the housekeeper. I was Harper, and I was free.